Hello and welcome to the Scallywag. This is our first episode, and we have had several technical difficulties,
Look,
including.
there's a little red box in the corner that says live, Jonathan. Look at that. I wonder what that indicates. Maybe it indicates that we're live.
About being live, yeah. Instead of
Yeah.
talking for 50 minutes without actually going live, But at least we did this, when we have zero audience and zero viewers, as compared to, the tens that we potentially can have one day.
Teaming with singulars.
Yes. So we have been having some interesting discussions as in regards to Lent and other things, but maybe we should give a quick introduction of what this channel is all about. So we are talking about nothing in particular of a Catholic variety, and of the things that we discuss, we guarantee that none of it will be beneficial, or at least only sort of incidentally beneficial to your eternal salvation. As we like to say, you will receive your reward in purgatory for the time that you spend on here, whether or not it's for good or ill.
Yes.
So, are you joining your Lenten beverage?
I am enjoying my Lenten beverage, but I'm almost done enjoying my Lenten beverage for some reason.
I'm completely done my Lenten beverage. I was just saying that this is more of a communist beverage. From our local co-op from Western Canada. You're just so mad that we spent 50 minutes not even broadcasting.
It's a certain. It has a certain piquant element.
Well, it's a piquant Lenten discussion, James.
Did the last bit at least the audio get recorded, or is it just all?
No, it was.
It's
nothing.
all in the abyss. Okay, excellent.
No recording at all. We were just talking to each other.
You say you receive your reward in purgatory, and like 50 minutes of idle chatter that I know how to pay for, and I don't even get the vainglory of having done it in some sort of
what we're all about,
pseudo public way.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
you've deprived me of the one benefit I was going to get, which was temporal in nature.
What about the benefit of my company, though, James? That you get every day when we work together.
That's I'll always cherish.
You always cherish my company. Always
cherish.
And
must cherish.
Well, I'm sorry that I didn't click the button in the correct way. It's been a bit of a night of falderall and hijinks with trying to get this going, but such is life, such is the internet ways. You were having technical difficulties of your own, trying to get your interesting microphone going there, and now you switched to a smaller device.
The laptop had its own sort of. It went on some sort of workers' strike.
Yes, yeah, that was kind of our discussion when we before we well, we thought we had an imaginary audience, and look, we do have our first viewers, so that's exciting, you know. So and even a comment, yay! So it's we have a fan, James.
Hooray!
Hooray! We were just telling. I was just telling James that we're going for 50 minutes without realizing that we were actually not live. So we're a little bit sad.
A little bit sad.
A little bit sad, but we're also glad because it's our first episode. Yay, Catholic Scallywag.
Do you have any more topics lined up? I don't think I can
Rehash the old
rehash the old ones with the same
relish.
With the same relish. No, another night, perhaps.
Okay,
another
yeah,
performance.
I think we'll leave that. Yeah, we'll leave that for the thing. But I did want you to get your reaction to this video that I wanted to show. Oh no, not that one. It's your favorite individual. I wanted to share my screen and show you this video, which I think is a great embodiment of the spirit of democracy. So I'll just cue this up.
You're 18 years old and a U.S. citizen and you love your freedom, register to vote. Fight censorship.
Democracy now.
I really wish I had a time machine and I could show that to
the founding fathers. Well, maybe even like Pericles.
Also,
Pericles.
What's the
show it to Pericles?
Democracy. Who's the fellow who wrote Democracy in America? It was de Tocqueville, Alexis de Tocqueville.
De Tocqueville, yeah.
I'd love to show that to him and be like, so you thought that was a really cool idea. Let me just spoil your fun here. I think I'd also just while I've got a time machine, because why not, just maybe dip back a little earlier, be like, Henry VIII, listen, I know that you're really into Anne Boleyn, but you just got to take one for the team here, because this is, I got to deal with this all the time.
This sort of general.
This is too much.
General ambience, yeah.
You kind of do this. This is kind of your fault. Let's just cross your legs and let's keep it together.
So, but what sort of I mean, do you think that he's like the I suppose in the English-speaking world, he's kind of the
Parliament has the authority that it does because of Henry VIII, basically. First of all, when you're asking a group of people to ratify the fact that you're the supreme head of the church, rather than those who
are of course
appointed by the apostles, that's not very helpful. But he and Hilaire Belloc points this out very nicely in his biography of Charles I, which is that he really opens the door for the revolutions that you see in Parliament by eliminating the church, taking all their property, dumping it off on a newly rich class, who then proceed to object to being governed, and ultimately decapitate one of his
I mean, there were temporal leaders who stood up against the church all the time before. I mean, like
Yeah, but they
especially
didn't
like
confiscate all their property and have them executed and then say that they were the supreme head of that church.
this is true. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, Frederick II did crown himself in like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
yeah, but he didn't ransack church property. That's part of the problem here. And then it's not okay, that's a bad move because as it turns out, the Catholic Church is until very recently very good at defending monarchy. And but the bigger problem here, besides the major spiritual problem, the bigger merely economical problem is that he's taken a group of people who have a good amount of money and then reallocated an enormous amount of money to them, and they're all have the same idea, which is, hey, how would you like to run the show instead of these guys?
Yeah, of course.
Because the king, so before in the Middle Ages, like there's not taxes aren't a normal thing.
Oh,
The
really?
crown owned land and received rents from their land, and the same way everyone else makes money was the way that the crown made money.
Right.
And so historically, for example, one of the ways in which the if I recall correctly, the Hohenstaufens got so rich was they're just like the push to the east. Basically, everything you conquer outside of Germany, which is already territory that has traditional owners, goes to the crown. Like it grows to the emperor. So now this family gets this enormous amount of territory outside of the territory, so they can kind of dwarf the electors economically and put them in their place if there's a war. Because otherwise, like they don't really have the best territory, and they don't have any claims on their neighbor's territory. You can't just say, I'm the emperor, I'm just taking your stuff now. That's not how law works, and the church would argue against it. That is, for example, how William the Conqueror ends up with, as he's the heir, he goes to the Pope and says, hey, I'm the rightful heir. And the Pope says, like, yeah, it looks good. You know, here's the papal banner.
Right.
Yeah. Go to town. And so he enriches Henry VIII enriches all these people who then turn around and go like, well, we're not getting everything we want. And the crown is kind of impoverished. They're spending a lot of money, more money, because of the modern age. They're spending a lot of more money than they did historically. And so taxes were something that you required Parliament in order to levy. They were special amounts of money that you gave to the crown. And it was basically like, hey, there's a war. It concerns us all. Give me the money so I can raise the army and we can go fight the war, or we're all going to be speaking a different language.
So what are you telling me is that Disney's Robin Hood was a lie, when King John as a lion was just like, double the taxes, triple the taxes? That didn't actually happen.
Yes and no. So when someone comes to you for taxes, there are two types of taxes. There is a tax that would go, the poll taxes were very rare though. It'd be very unpopular because literally every single person would be paying a poll tax. But
like, what is that? Is that just like a flat tax?
It's per person or something like that.
Right.
But when you tax a baron, where do you think he gets the money from?
Like these peasants?
Exactly. He goes to his subordinates and he's, well, where's my money? And then it flows downhill until someone gets flogged too hard, unless they're very nice and they don't do that to you. Which a lot of them might refuse to do because it would be unchivalrous and disgusting to do that.
To do what?
To your underlings, and so they wouldn't do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
but the taxes, there started to be a lot more taxes, and Parliament realized that the king needed them to do whatever he wanted, and so they should get to have more of a say all the time, thus leading to the English Civil War, which gives us closer to what our modern parliaments are like.
So like kind of like the like Tolkien always called himself like an anarcho-monarchist, and so there is kind of like a there is sort of like some sense behind that appellation then, like is because it's like because it would be sort of not anarchistic, but it would be without having sort of like centralized taxes, like in a modern sort of parliamentary monarchy, you wouldn't.
Well, centralized taxes centralized taxes come from that breakdown in traditional monarchy in the first place.
Right.
And that's, I think, I mean, and then you can see them kind of progressively creeping up on us, like income tax. That was only implemented in order to pay for World War I. Do you think we paid for it by now?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, isn't the war debt in Germany still increasing? I mean, that's from the Second World War, but it was, but I think it's, but yeah, but I've heard that they could pay it off easily if the banks actually gave the government, you know, what they needed to do. But I think it is like there's like a ticker somewhere where it actually has kind of a live count of like Germany's national debt, which is insane. Like it just kind of puts Canada, the United States, to shame.
Anything to do with post like these sort of modern contemporary financial systems is just gibberish to me anyway, so I don't know what any of it means.
I don't know why we started talking about sort of well, I guess we were talking about monarchy in general because we were talking about democracy, which seems to be like sort of a you know, a thing that is gonna be a common whipping boy for this channel, but yeah, I don't know. Like I also had sort of as one of the topics in the description about are we permitted to criticize the Magisterium, and why aren't we criticizing the Magisterium more?
Are we permitted to?
Well, let me show
you're
the clip again.
You're permitted to criticize them on I think anything that isn't dogma. I mean,
let me bring up a clip that we kind of shared earlier that I think will kind of like highlight what we were talking about earlier, and just I think it's we can kind of do a react to that since React content is popular these days. And you can kind of share your take on this. You know, it's just.
So here's the question. Let's suppose you're right. Shouldn't you also be angry at Francis so frequently speaking in a way that leaves him open to being misrepresented? Here's the problem with what you're saying. Say that about Jesus. Say that about Jesus. Jesus said, no one knows the hour, not even the Son. Was he ambiguous there? Should he have clarified himself? Was the problem Jesus, or is the problem us?
That's okay. So aside from the bit I said earlier, wherein Jesus always
well, we didn't have an earlier. We weren't live then.
No, our Lord always clarifies where there's a fact of misrepresentation. We had this discussion, despite the
non-liveness,
the brilliant philology of the 20th century, being much better at Greek than the people who spoke it. That's not ambiguous at all. He said no one knows the hour. What is it? It's not ambiguous. It's about the apocalypse. Why would he have to clarify that? He already told you. Like, you don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I
like,
know, but you don't get to know.
to sort of like repeat the point, when we weren't live, like, I mean, what he's sort of, his whole sort of like shtick, Michael Lofton, is that we have to be always charitable in our interpretations. But I mean, like, but I don't understand, like, if he lived in like the 11th century, would he be opposed to the people saying just like, oh, John the 12th is having like, all these, orgies, and he's the, the illegitimate son of the previous pope? Like, are we just, does the pope just get a like a pass about like anything he does? Like, I mean, as Catholics, we should be pious and like, have like a you know uh a respect of the, of the apostolic see, for sure. But I mean, so what does that mean, and what does it mean to sort of like, not just like sort of turn a blind eye to the actions of the Pope or members of the Magisterium?
So, on the one hand,
Mm-hmm.
I do want to take a bit of a different take than most people with this.
Sure.
So on the one hand, though, he does the Holy Father does say these sort of cryptic things that are open to misinterpretation. He is doing us a bit of a favor, because confusion is the guardian of truth, as the great Charles Coulomb is fond of saying. And so when the turgid waters of error finally pass, those confused utterances go with them, and the truth remains.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's a reason sphinxes guard things. They speak in riddles, and they're pretty good at guarding things. So that's the advantage of the lack of clarity. The other thing to keep in mind with the lack of clarity is that the majority of people who are going to him to ask him questions that he gives these bizarre, unintelligible answers to are the kind of people who, the very least of what they want, really, the very bottom of their list is a bizarre, unintelligible answer, but what they want is a blunt contradiction of Christian tradition.
Yeah, I mean,
like, no one shoves a microphone in his face on the papal plane, like seeking the font of orthodoxy to learn how to amend their lives. Like,
well, yeah, that's true. Yeah,
journalists they're not honest. They're not in this they're there to maybe get like a little thing that they can turn into some gibberish.
well, that's like what happened with Pope Benedict. We've talked about this before, like about like how someone asked him, it's like, well, are there any like, would there be any sort of like acceptable uses of contraception like ever? And it's just like, and then he got into like his like theologian mode, which is just like always like danger zone. Like, you needed to have a better person on his PR set, who, because he said it's just like, well, I suppose like hypothetically, and then you're talking about this elaborate situation about like, like a male prostitute in a prison, who has sort of some sort of like moral sign of moral progress by you using contraception than not, since it's not fruitful anyways. It's like, no, just say no, never use it ever. Just like, yeah,
or just respond with another question. What is contraception?
Oh yeah, this was a good fallback as well.
Well, you can always pretend to not know what the words that they're using are. That's fun. That's an enjoyable tactic. I've done that with scam callers before.
Right.
You'd be surprised how much endurance they can have in the face of sheer incomprehension.
Yeah, how did that go?
Hope springs eternal in the human breast. He hung up on me eventually.
Right.
But so I'm in that way, I mean, it's sort of frustrating if you're paying attention and you're hoping that the Pope will stand up for something. That's the kind of hope one would cherish, but anyway, I mean, the obvious answer is you're permitted to criticize things like unbridled license or even bridled license to a certain extent. Depends on the bridle, but and are you allowed to criticize dumb when they say dumb things? Is it the lack of filial piety? On one hand, you could make the argument it is, but on the other hand, you could make the argument that it is a lack of filial piety to let this sort of thing go on unchecked and allow a person to do this sort of thing. It's sort of like in the vein of when Chesterton talked about patriotism, and he says, "My country, right or wrong, is like saying my mother, drunk or sober."
Right.
If your mother is drunk, you do something about it. To try to cover the shame. Obviously, there's a passage about that in a fairly popular book about covering up the nakedness of one's parents. But so I mean, there's a bit of to engage in the sort of like gotcha journalism, like everyone look at what he did, look at how stupid it is.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
I think that's
stupid. Well,
yeah.
there's not a lot of people who are doing that. Some of them are, though. They definitely should stop. But you would go first, and then like, hey, you really shouldn't do this. Now the question of like, okay, you tell them that they shouldn't do that, and then they just spit in your face.
Well, I know. I mean, like that's kind of the irony of this is that they always talk about like going back to like an earlier day when like the church was less centralized and stuff. It's like, but do they actually want that? Do they actually want people who actually criticize them and tell them what they really think? I
That's
mean,
not happening.
Do they really want to have like sort of like a kind of like a lay sort of like element like in the early sort of patristic days when like they could actually like say is like, no, we don't want this pope, we want another one? Like, do they actually want that? Like, they kind of, it seems like they pretend that they do, but I don't know if they actually do.
They're not keen on it. They keep talking about it, but the stuff that they're doing is going to lead to it happening. That's the ultimate irony, is the sort of you never want to get into a game of we'll see who has the power around here, because that's when you're at that point, it's never a good point to be at.
No,
everyone just peaceably going about their duty is much better than a power struggle.
Yeah, pretty soon you're gonna have to start charging the cardinals like rent for their room and board at the Vatican grounds and stuff like that. It doesn't seem like it's a good situation when it kind of comes to that. I mean, because I mean, you pointed out, like, I mean, they're required to be there. I mean, it doesn't. So are they like charging all like the old like monsignors who have kind of like been there forever as well? Like, I mean, I don't know.
Well, I'm not there, and I don't know any of them, so I can't tell you what's going on. I just
it's a bizarre situation.
It seems yeah, that one's difficult to kind of figure out. But I do, returning to the question of whether or not we can criticize, I mean, like, we have historical examples of criticism. We have historical examples of criticism being effective.
Yeah.
And
one's being less effective.
It depends on the purpose of the criticism.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not the most edifying thing to just sort of like to try and, use to monetize your YouTube channel or your media outlet. That was kind of one of my criticisms of Lysette News back when I was kind of in more of my defend Pope Francis sort of like mode. Like earlier in his pontificate was just like I'm close friends with well, not close friends, but like acquaintances with some of the editorial staff at LifeSite News that I remember. I was like, well, I mean, like there's a bit of a conflict of interest when you guys like obviously get more clicks and more sort of traffic on your website when you have articles that are that are critical of the Pope than ones that were just talking about something nice that happened.
Well, journalism is about riling up the passions in people, right?
Sure. Yeah.
It's not.
I mean,
I don't think it like it's never objective for long because people just kind of tune it out. So, but with LifeSite News, and their primary objective is LifeSite News. So their primary objective is to go after the a different issue, and that one it's an effective tactic to get people riled up. But then you move into church politics and you apply the same tactic. Well, to apply the same tactic, you have to have gotcha moments. You gotta like excerpt people. You gotta hammer them on points. You gotta hide behind bushes with binoculars, shouting, Cardinal McCarrick, we know what you did, that sort of thing. And
apparently, he just recently, I was looking at news articles from this past week, and apparently he said that he didn't do anything. He's just like, no, he denies sex abuse charges in a telephone interview.
I mean, why not? Why would you if you were like caught red-handed like that, like why would you admit to it? You just be like, this never happened. What are you talking about? Like, you might as well, like.
Yeah, I mean, but so was he caught red-handed? I don't remember the ins and outs of that. I know that it was James Grine was testified to him, but like, what I missed all that stuff. Like, I don't know if you.
Well, it's not like they didn't catch him like in an act or something, but they sort of like, it's pretty clearly like.
It seems
it's clearly enough for him to be penalized by his superiors and menaced by government officials and that sort of thing to sort of be like, okay, we'll deal with this.
Oh no, but the government officials had no interest in doing anything, though. I mean, it was a clear like double standard, with the way that the secular authorities treated McCarrick and treated Cardinal Pell.
Mm-hmm. But the well, it depends on who your friends are. What were we talking about again? George Newmeyer, like shouting at McCarrick, whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an odd thing to make a living out of, to just sort of, I mean, like, yeah, we're gonna hammer them hard, like journalism, we're gonna get them.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastical journalism is bizarre.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's sort of an importation of this this kind of thing that was invented in the Enlightenment into the sort of the life of a medieval institution, and it sits oddly.
Which medieval institution?
The church.
Oh,
Well, an ancient institution, but
right.
in the way that it's organized in the West,
Sure.
has quite a medieval, like the Cardinals. It's a medieval organization right there.
Right.
But we're importing this sort of like weird Enlightenment practice of like, aha, gotcha.
Right.
And I mean, do you not like look at some of these headlines that pop up on the phone from time to time, and they're like, so and so is now this person who was in some movies is now this. Like, don't you have better things to do than just leave these people alone? Why are you following? Like, there was a headline recently about, so Bruce Willis has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, so he's like going senile, and there's paparazzi following him around. Like, leave him alone.
Yeah, I know.
He's losing his mind.
Yeah.
Let him be. Can he just be happy while he still remembers who his wife is? Stop it. Leave him alone. What's wrong with you people?
Leave Brittany alone.
Well, they should have left her alone. The poor woman.
Yeah.
She's been through a lot. Clearly, it's not over. That's not good. Just leave her alone. And this same kind of obsession sort of leaks into church politics, and it's
well, I mean, I guess like
bizarre.
we are, but like there are sort of like, you know, obviously reactions to sort of implications about like, you know, like how we are, how and where we're able to, you know, worship. I mean, it's of recent, you know, memory. I mean, obviously that sort of thing inspires, you know, some of this journalism and some of these sort of virulent reactions.
Yes, but I don't think the journalism is what gets it, propels it, a movement to sort of. I don't think the journalism is what pushes it forward. I think that it's thought of as one of those instruments for pushing it forward, but I don't think that it actually accomplishes that task.
I remember Michael Lofton had this video about whether Taylor Marshall was responsible for Traditionis Custodes or whatever.
Does he really? Okay, so do Americans really think that America is the entirety of the planet?
It's yeah.
Do they really? Do they? No, this thing wasn't even. I mean, I'm sure that like maybe one sentence of the document was written by the Holy Father, like that. This was all drafted by ghostwriters and slapped in front of him, and he put his signature on it. And they were probably all like angry. They were probably all the same angry prelates from Europe who threatened to go into schism supposedly under Benedict XVI.
Oh, when did that happen?
There was a rumor that there was a number of more
Germanzonian
enthusiastic prelates from different countries in Europe, not just the Germans. Don't just blame the Germans now. They were all up in arms about the old mass, and part of what made his life so stressful was balancing this people who wanted it with these people who really didn't want it, who had friends in high places, kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm sure it was just a bone thrown to them, more or less. And what counteracts that, I don't think, is like, oh, look at this, he's behaving badly, we got him, aha, we got him this time. It's not but I don't think it was like, oh, look, this one American makes clickbait videos, and he's look, he
Oh,
wrote
but
a book. I think he's on
he gave it to
to
the Pope. He gave it to the Pope. Put it
he
right in his
gave it, and
hand.
he gave it to me, and I can't read it because it's in English. That
Yeah,
they
it's a weird. Yeah, it's a weird thesis.
like, oh, this is the world. I got him now. Like, there's other concerns going on. Certainly, there's prelates in America who are happy to use this as a trench shovel with which to strike the backs of innocent families' head. But
Did you did you ever read that article that came out that was sort of like from these like European Jesuits? They're trying to kind of summarize sort of the situation of like the church in America. And I think it was about church militant. That was one of the sort of cited sources. And they were talking about how this is like this new integralism. And it was just like because integralism amongst like kind of like liberals in general of all stripes is sort of like a is the bad guy, even though but like church militant doesn't like strike me as a particularly like traditional sort of like integralist source. Like they just seem to be sort of like broadly conservative and
integralism means
yeah.
something different than in a couple of different circles. During the lifetime of Pius X, it was sort of the traditionalist movement of the time. And there were groups of people calling themselves integral Catholics.
Oh, sort of
And
like
this was causing issues.
like Action Francais or whatever.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it means something a little bit different
In Europe.
to the Europeans, because
Right.
then of course these Jesuits getting the turn down the pike, getting the term, and they're sort of like, oh well, they're that thing. It's sort of like if you accuse anyone who's excessively censorious and pietistic of being a Jansenist. I'm sure that they do not fall into the error with respect to the nature of grace and free will that the Jansenists do. But you're like, he's gloomy and he wears black and he carries around a human skull everywhere. He must be a Jansenist. Where he may have perfectly orthodox opinions about the nature of grace and free will, just being the unpleasant human being. But these Jesuits are probably like, anyone who's traditional is an integralist because we didn't like them. They were bad.
They were bad. But it seems like it's weird though, because it seems like it goes back to like the sort of the whole sort of like involvement in sort of like secular affairs is kind of like a bit is a weird kind of integralism. It's a weird sort of like dynamic of like sort of entering into sort of like secular domain, but in sort of like a in a way that it shouldn't be. Like like I mean like that like conservation or whatever, and environmental policies.
Well, man is a political animal, so you're not separating politics from religion. That's silly.
Well, sure, but
so it's the church the church and churchmen are gonna have a say. It's a bit of a branding game about like, no, they're the ones who want to rule you with the Inquisition. Well, there's a bit of an Inquisition on the other side, and they'll try to ruin you with their own Inquisition. So,
right. My friend Matt and I, we were visiting one of Canada's famous receding glaciers, and we were thinking about just like doing sort of like a kind of some penitential procession, and like kind of like it had like these little signposts at like each of the years where the glacier was, and we could kind of do like our way of the cross or our way of the glacier as it receded in the devastating wake of man's interference. Even though it was like receding, even though like the earliest point was like from like the 1850s, or it was pre, or I think it was even before that. I think it was like pre-industrial revolution.
All that heavy breathing.
Yeah, and cows farting.
The I mean, the gotcha journalism thing doesn't help, but it doesn't help. But it's a sort of, I think it's distasteful. There's something definitely distasteful, but it is it's sort of reeks of, actually even further earlier than Enlightenment. It reeks of that sort of Protestant pamphleteering, like I got you on the pamphlet here. You know?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of that. I mean, you know, the some of the earliest Protestants were famous about doing that and nailing it to doors.
But I think people feel like that if they don't go in for these armaments, then they're not armed with anything. But I don't
Sure.
think I don't think like hard hitting journalism is really what's pushing forward the so-called movement for the desire to return to traditional worship in the Catholic Church. It's
Oh no, yeah. You mean the
desire
other
is,
side, yeah.
I
No,
mean,
it's like there's
people
no,
show up and then they find out about these things. Usually, that's the way that it goes.
yeah. I mean, like that's kind of the thing about the Latin Mass that I always found really attractive is that it's kind of like the least entertaining thing in the world, you know. And I think that's kind of what and I think it just kind of speaks for itself. Like it doesn't have to be advertised or yeah. It's very yeah, it's very sort of like the opposite of sort of some of those like more grotesque instantiations of the quote unquote new evangelization, you know, where you try and make everything sexy and
It's exciting.
I'm so glad that it's not exciting. That's the best part about it. Well, should we call it a wrap?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it's getting late.
I'm talking for about
47 minutes.
double that time.
Yes. I think more because I think we'd gone like a full 50 minutes before the I finally hit the red button.
Yeah, and then there was the part where I punched my laptop computer.
I know they missed all the peoples missed that, you know, all the
drama.
viewers. All right. Well, this is the Catholic Scallywag signing out.